Hi, I'm Amanda Krugliak. I'm the arts curator at the Institute for the Humanities Gallery. And today I am so lucky to be with Nicole Marroquin, who is our visiting artist in residence, to talk about her show, this marvelous show in the gallery, With Care. You have this really interesting multi-dimensional practice. Just the shape of your practice to me is so unusual. Can you talk a little bit about that and your circuitous path as to how you sort of landed where you are now?
Sure. Well, I have been a printmaker in one era of my life, and then I was sort of swept away with the romance and the excitement of ceramics. And I worked steadily as a clay sculptor for years. But recently, I got excited about print again. And so what is represented here is almost entirely print and ceramic sculpture. But at the same time, the print I was working on is also related to history. And so I have a lot of interest in what I call hyperlocal history of the neighborhood where I live. All of the work in this room is related to a really small geographic area, like about a square mile. Everything that happened in my prints, as well as the photographer whose work is in the show, are all sort of evolving around this really relatively small community in southwest Chicago called Pilsen.
I think it's so fascinating to think about how visual material that documents a place, is so much a part of what the meaning of community is, mm-hmm. right? Or the history and the future of that community.
Yeah. I got really excited about the history when I was like sitting around in a coffee shop and somebody was like, "Oh yeah, well this happened." And I said, "Wait, what happened?" There was this massive student uprising in a school that would have been 2 blocks from my house, and I had never heard of it, So I teach artists to become art teachers, among other things, and schools are my business. Like, I know what's up. How did I not know about a school that had been 2 blocks from my house that was almost like this seat of like the Chicano movement in wow. Chicago, why haven't I learned about it? Because it hadn't been written about.
Yeah.
And so I start Googling, I start talking to my neighbors, and I find out all this information, and that's a lot of what is appearing in my prints in this show.
Yeah, it does that trace, which leads me to this next part I want to talk about. The show is called With Care, and I wonder if you could talk about, we use that word a lot right now, especially in thinking about self-care and mm-hmm. care of others. And here you are talking about preserving histories, right, and visual traces. So can you talk a little bit more about the title With Care and all that conveys?
Sure. I have been spending a lot of my time recently caring for the materials of a friend of mine, an artist named Diana Solis, who was also a very active documentary photographer and experimental photographer as well in Pilsen in the 70s, 80s, and a little bit of the 90s. And she had just put her work away and mentioned it to me, and I thought, wait, where is it? It's in a basement? How come I don't know about this? Wait, you documented this work and you documented like radical queer organizing in Mexico City, and wait, what? I was just wanted to feast my eyes on it at first, but then I started to realize that this is the person who laid the road for me to be able to do what I was doing. I don't want to be a first. Yeah. And I was looking, and I spent a bit of time and thought on looking for the people who came before me who laid the path. And she's definitely one of those people. And so I started working on her material, just, scanning and studying and identifying, describing. Taught a class about her work, and I realized that, she's my my foremother, you know?
Yeah.
And so it is with tender loving care that I work on her materials, that I tried to build in her work into sort of the larger story. So the schools that had these sort of these uprisings that I talk about in the prints, like she went to them. I was saying, man, she's in all my projects for a while. But she, you know, not only that, has done an immense amount of documentation of some really important parts of Chicago. Primarily for me, what I'm excited about is the Latinx queer community in Chicago, which, you know, is just sort of exists in our minds, right? But now there's the pictures.
Sure,
Changes
sure.
everything, you know?
Yeah.
Changes everything.
I just hear you, you know, you talk about it and thinking visually, like walking through this space and how that relates to these relationships that you're talking about from one to another, and all these opportunities to lift people or buoy people or, you know, preserve something. Just the arc of that, I think, is just so incredibly beautiful to think about your life that way and the potential for all of these unexpected, you know, crossing of paths and ways that we can connect to each other.
I mean, I knew her for 5 or 6 years before she even mentioned this thing to me. You know, we just knew each other as artists in the same neighborhood. I knew her as an illustrator, and she shared a yearbook with me when I was doing research on the schools, and it all just came together at once. The sculptures are about people who are my neighbors. It's all about I think a community that had really done a lot of work to advance the causes and create access paths for the residents in the neighborhood. Yeah.
So when you thought about composing this exhibition, and you told us a little bit about it, but like when you're in the middle of it, because over the past week, you know, it's really a show that's about process.
Yeah.
The way you're in here and you're thinking about what is talking to what and what to include, and pattern upon pattern. So talk to us a little bit about that process for you, how you're making those choices.
Well, in part, I'm trying to bring the work that I've made together I'm trying to bring all this different work together so that it is providing its own context. It is also like leaving questions, which I think art has a unique ability to do, right? I'm not an historian. I'm not trying to do that work. But it's sort of creating a whole artwork, a total artwork, you know, and also leaving a lot of questions open. Sometimes I like to say that I'm out here fishing for historians, you know, and academics to come dig in. You know, there's all this incredible work that needs to be done, right? And one way to teach about it and think about it and attract people to it is with images.
Yeah.
I think. And also, too, I feel like sometimes I'm a salesperson for, like, hey, everybody, go to the archives. Like, it's an exciting place to be. It might not feel like you're welcome there, but as soon as you talk to a librarian, as soon as you lock eyes with them, they're like, oh, thank you for coming.
Yeah,
you know?
It's like an adventure, you know, this exploration. And I think here we are, this research university, and there's the possibility for that. So many different areas for people to collaborate, to look into archives for inspiration, to think about how art activates archives or research. So
yeah, and we can respond to it. And the beautiful thing about art, like I mentioned, is it can also just ask more questions and leave things open or point to an absence even, right? Because archives are not always, you know, telling the story of the people I'm thinking about, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of absence, but then at the same time, you know, banging the drum around some of this history is also creating openings, you know, for things to change.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm going to ask you this last question because I'm the curator and I'm totally focused on Nicole Marroquin. And I want to ask this because I feel like this exhibition is is sort of a celebration, right, of you and the work you've done and your history here and all the people that you know at the university where you went to school and the town where you grew up. And it's also about Chicago where you are now. So what does it feel like for you to come back to this place as part of its history and now be where you're standing?
Well, it's weird. I gotta say, I love it because, I mean, all this work that's here is recent, and it's work I made in response to the community where I am, right? And that's the way I function, right? I respond to the people that are around me and I make work about them, and the media I use is based on what the work is asking for, right? Yeah. And so people here have not seen it. Right, you know, it's like completely brand new. And it's also like I've been able to like realize these really far out ideas that are not maybe like one whole package when they appear as an individual piece, but putting them all together, it makes sense. It's like a map, you know, in a way. But also, it's incredibly satisfying to see all this work together, to be able to put it together, you know, and to be able to do everything from color the walls exactly the way I wanted them, and to also show some incredibly new work, you know, that is, you know, in progress, you know, because it's all part of the same thing.
Right.
You know, yeah, it's part of the same system.
And I think, like, for me, seeing this work in this space, I just love that it takes chances, right? That it is kind of boisterous, and it's not something you can easily pen in, and it feels like it has a life outside of this space, so I love it.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you for this opportunity. It's really exciting to do this and to see it all come together.
I feel the same.
Thank
See ya.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks.